Now let us start a new topic, clubbing of income. Clubbing, as the name suggests, club, combine the incomes. This topic, clubbing of income, is altogether a new chapter in the Income Tax Act. It is having special relevance in the Income Tax Act. Clubbing helps in avoiding tax avoidance and tax evasion, basically. Predominantly, you cannot say evasion, avoidance. As the name suggests, clubbing of income, what it will help in doing this, in doing, what help it will provide to the tax department. If income is earned by another person, tax will not be paid by that another person. Maybe I have to pay the tax on the income of that another person. If I gift some amount to my minor child, it's an example only. If I gift some amount to my minor child and minor child has deposited that amount in a bank, so bank will give interest to the minor child, but minor child will not include this interest income in his or her head of income. The person who has given that gift, so if as a father, if I have given the gift to my minor child, I have to show that interest income in my head, in my hands. So similarly, there are so many circumstances. Now, if I have transferred some amount to my wife, or if my wife has transferred some amount to me, then on that amount, whatever I have earned, the transferor, the partner who has transferred that amount, that person has to pay the tax. It is clubbing. Whenever government thinks that, or what act takes into consideration, whenever there are chances of any manipulation, or whenever there are chances that tax avoidance can happen, some people are trying to avoid the taxes, this clubbing of income comes into picture. It helps in saving those situations where tax is going to be avoided. I have given you the simple example of this spouse case, transferring the assets to spouse. Of course, there are some conditions which we need to check. But if income is transferred to the spouse without any divorce situation, without any other consideration being received, why you are transferring the amount to the spouse? So government says that, act says that it is intentional on your part because you want to transfer the income to the spouse, because earlier if you don't transfer the income to the spouse, only you would have paid the tax. Just because you transferred the income, you simply wanted that now two people are there who will divide this income. Let me show you with the help of this word file, which is, I think, available on the screen. Now see how clubbing will help in preventing this situation of tax avoidance. How it will help. How it will help. For example, Mr. X transferred rupees 20 lakh to Mrs. X. Of course, without any reason, without any divorce situation, or without any reason. Mrs. X earned rupees 2 lakh as interest income on this amount received from his husband. Now, if you don't know clubbing of income, how you would have solved this case? You would have shown that Mr. X and Mrs. X. Now, suppose Mr. X has a business income of rupees 14 lakh. Now, how you would have solved this case had you are not aware, if you are not aware about the provisions of clubbing of income, how you would have shown? You would have shown that PGBP in the hands of Mr. X 14 lakh, and Mrs. X nil, but you would have shown income from other sources. Mr. X nil, Mrs. X 2 lakh. This is the normal point. This is my gross total income, 14 lakh and 2 lakh. Suppose there is no deduction under section 80, nil, nil. So how much is total income? This is what every person will do if they are not aware about the provisions of clubbing of income. And there is no harm in this. This is the genuine concept. But here there is a problem, because income tax department or act doubts the intention of this person. Why you are transferring this amount to this spouse without any reason? Why are you transferring? That means you simply wanted to avoid paying tax at higher rate. Why? Had you not transferred this amount, you would have included 2 lakh in your income from other sources. And above 10 lakh rupees, we know that the tax rate of an individual assessee is 30%. This everyone knows. Just because you transferred this 2 lakh rupees, now how much tax you have saved indirectly? Your wife will not pay any tax because her income does not exceed 2 lakh 50. So tax is nil. Had this 2 lakh been included in your head of income, you would have paid how much? You would have paid how much? Since I'm covered under 30% slab, I would have paid 60,000. So what was my intention? I tried to reduce my tax liability. Without any reason, I transferred to my spouse because I wanted to avoid paying tax. My slab was 30%. My wife's slab is nil. So better I transfer the income. This is what my intention is. But here Income Tax Act comes into picture, and it says that as per section 64, I will show you those sections and clauses, that this 2 lakh will not be included in the income of Mrs. X. It will be included in the income of Mr. X. And how I will solve this case then? After applying clubbing provisions, the computation of total income will be as follow. How I will apply the provisions of clubbing? I will say that income from other sources, because of clubbing, I will include this 2 lakh in my hands. I will show it as 16 lakh. And here the income of Mrs. X will be nil. Though she is earning the income, but because of clubbing, she will not call it as her income for the purpose of taxation. There is nothing in the hands of. So effectively, there will be an increase of at least 60,000 in the tax liability of Mr. X just because of clubbing. Now there is a decrease tax, this decrease by this. Decrease by 60, but now applying the provisions of clubbing, tax will increase by 60,000. Is the clubbing little bit clear that what is the intention of clubbing? It will merge the income of other persons in my hands, in the hands of the assessee. Please raise your hand if this concept is clear. Please raise your hand if this clubbing of income example is clear and you got an idea now what is the basic purpose of clubbing. I would like to show you the original act now. Okay, now let me share with you the website of tax department and let me start formally clubbing of income. Now see this chapter, it is altogether a new chapter. It is chapter 5. What is the heading of chapter 5? Income of other persons included in assesses total income. It is nothing but clubbing. So click chapter 5. And these are the sections of clubbing. 6 sections maximum, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65. So let me start reading one by one each section and let me help you in understanding clubbing. Now formally we should start reading section 60. Now this is my first section. As you can read, it is chapter 5, nothing but clubbing of income. Income of other persons included in assesses total income. Income is earned by another person, but that will be included in my hands. Heading. So this is my first section. Transfer of income when there is no transfer of assets. Now this is like a fraud. So what you are saying that I have transferred the income only, asset will remain with me. What type of transfer is this? I have not transferred my house to any person. House remains with me, but what I am saying is that rental income will be earned by by the person to whom I have transferred this rental income. House remains with you. This is an example. House remains with you. But what you are saying, I am continue to be the owner of the house, but income will be earned by my friend Y. Isn't it a fraud transfer? If you really wanted to transfer the income, you should have transferred the asset also. That is why section 60 says what? All income arising to any person by virtue of a transfer, because of that transfer, whether revocable or not. That means it can be revoked at my hand or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whether effected before or commencement of this act. So whether before 1961 or after 1961, doesn't matter. Ignore it. When there is where there is no transfer of assets from which the income arises, you have not transferred the asset. What you are saying, I am transferring the income. Government says it's nothing but a fraud. It will be chargeable to tax as income of the transferor and shall be included in his total income. I hope section 60 is clear to you. Whenever any income is transferred and not the asset because of which that income is being earned, then government says apply section 60, has to be applied, and the transferor will include that income in his or her hands. That's it. This is my first section, section 60, clubbing of income. Any problem, please ask. I have covered with you my first section. Whenever only income is transferred without transferring the asset, it is not a genuine transfer, clubbing comes into picture. Please raise your hand if section 60 is clear and if you have understood the example. Transferring the income without transfer of asset is a fraud transfer, clubbing comes into picture immediately, and the transferor has to include that income in his or her hands. Very good. Now next section. Section 61. Now what it is, it is taking care of another issue. Now I say that in section 60 Gov Act says if you transfer the income without transferring the asset, clubbing comes into picture, you have to pay the tax. Now I am smart, I want to be very smart. I say that no, I have transferred the asset also, but the transfer is revocable. That means anytime I can get back that asset. So government says what type of transfer is this? भाई अगर किसी को ट्रांसफर कर दी तो कर दी, जब मन करे उससे जाके वापस ले आओगे आप asset. That means your intention was fraud intention. It says revocable transfer of asset. All income arising to any person by virtue of a revocable transfer of asset is also nothing but a fraud. It shall be chargeable to tax as income of the transferor and shall be included in his total income. Any transfer of asset which is revocable, which can be revoked anytime, that means I can get back my asset anytime. Government says these are not genuine transfers. In such cases also under section 61 clubbing will be applied and you have to include the income in your own hands. Please raise your hand if section 61 is also clear. In section 60, you are not transferring the asset at all, you are transferring the income. Clubbing is applicable under section 60. Now what happens? You are transferring the asset also, but the transfer is revocable transfer. Government says that is also nothing but a fraud. Clubbing is also applicable, but under section 61. Next point. Now section 62 and 63, I am giving these for self-study. You can read the meaning. Section 63 simply gives you a definition that for these purposes 60, 61, 62. What is this revocable transfer? That's it. What is revocable? Which can be revoked anytime. So this is the definition. I told you whenever you do not find the meaning of any word which is used in any section, always search that section first. If you do not find anything, go to section 2. But in this chapter of clubbing, meaning of revocable is defined. And this meaning is applicable only for this chapter because it clearly says only for the purposes of section 60, 61 and 62. Now suppose in any other section revocable word is also written. Don't apply this definition there. Act says that only for the purpose of section 60, 61 and 62, the meaning of revocable is this. What is the meaning? Whenever any transaction contains any provision for retransferring the asset or income to the transferor back, that is revocable. I explained this in the general meaning as a layman term that whenever you can get back your assets or the income. It is more specific. Act clearly says whenever you can get back your assets or the income, whether full or partial, it is revocable transfer. It is ingenuine transfer. Clubbing immediately comes into picture. So this is what section 63 is, but you should try and reading. Now I am now coming to 62. You can skip for the time being. You can skip for the time being. For your level, you can avoid 62. For your level, you should do 60, 61, 63. 62, if you want to read, you should try. Now, section 64 is lengthy. And after this, almost the chapter is over. Section 64. Because this section is having so many clauses, you can see. This is the main section of clubbing. Two sections of clubbing now you know. Section 60 is clubbing of income. Section 61 also talks about clubbing. Now my third section officially is section 64. What it says. Now heading of 64 says what? Income of individual to include income of spouse, minor child, etc. That means 64 is a wider section as compared to earlier sections. And let us start 64.1. Section 64 subsection 1. In computing the total income of any individual, there shall be included all such incomes as arises directly or indirectly. It is clause 2 to the spouse of such individual. Spouse, I gave you the example of the wife. Spouse means wife can also transfer something to the husband or husband can also transfer something to the wife. So that means spouse. to the spouse of such individual by way of salary, commission, fees, or any other form of remuneration, whether in cash or in kind, from a concern in which such individual has a substantial interest. Now I am working in X Limited. Suppose I am working in X Limited. In X Limited, I have substantial interest. That means I am having some power to take or influence the decision making of X Limited. You need to check the meaning of substantial interest. What I told you, always first check that respective section. If not, then you go to section 2. It is defined in this section. You can see here, explanation 2 defines it. For the purpose of clause 2, which I am studying, an individual shall be deemed to have a substantial interest in a concern. Clause 1, in a case where the concern is accompanied by X Limited. If I am working in X Limited, then when can you say that I have substantial interest in X Limited? If it shares, X Limited shares, not being shares entitled to fixed rate of dividend, whether with or without a further right to participate in profit. These are preference shares. That means only equity shares carrying not less than 20% of the voting power are at any time during the previous year owned beneficially by such person or partly by such person and partly by one or more of his relatives. So what is substantial interest? As an individual, if I'm talking about a company, when can I say that in this company I have substantial interest? If I have at least 20% equity shares of that company with me, I along with my relatives. So not only my shareholding matters, my shareholding plus shareholding of my relatives. If this together becomes 20% at least, I am having substantial interest. Next point. Concern cannot be a company. Concern can be a firm also. Concern can be any other situation also. In any other case. Now, if the concern is not a company, then you cannot say shares. Shares can only be issued by a company. Then what you are using? Act uses the word what? But if such person is entitled, or such person and one or more of his relatives are entitled in aggregate at any time during the previous year to not less than 20% profits of such concern. So when as an individual I can be having substantial interest in a company, when I am having at least 20% equity shares of that company along with my relatives, or if the concern is not a company, then if I along with my relatives is having at least 20% shares in the profit, then this company or concern is that company or concern in which I am having substantial interest. Now what clubbing 64 subsection 1 clause 2 says, suppose my wife is also working in this company. My wife is also working in the company and earning a salary of 40 lakh rupees. For example, as a shareholder, I am having substantial interest in X Limited. My wife is also working in X Limited and earning 40 lakh rupees per year. What Act says? It is subject to clubbing. That 40 lakh will not be taxable in the hands of my wife. It will be taxable in my hand. However, there is an exception. It says what? Provided nothing contained in this clause, nothing in this clause shall apply in relation to any income arising to the spouse where the spouse possesses technical or professional qualifications and the income is solely attributable to the application of his or her technical or professional knowledge and experience. Clubbing is not applicable if my wife is also working with proper qualification of the position which she is holding, or if she is working because of her own talent, experience and knowledge. In that case, clubbing is not applicable, otherwise there will be clubbing. This is my section 64(1)(2). Now I am summing up section 64(1)(2). Section 60 talks about clubbing of income. Section 61 talks about clubbing of income. Section 64 also talks about clubbing of income. But in section 64, we have so many clauses. Within section 64 subsection 1 clause 2, what is very simple point now if you want to sum up this, my first clubbing. Any income earned by the spouse from any concern in which the partner is having substantial interest, then whatever remuneration or salary is earned by the spouse from that concern in which the partner is having substantial interest, that remuneration will not be taxable in the hands of the spouse who is earning. It will be taxable in the hands of that partner who is having substantial interest in that concern. However, if the spouse is working with proper qualification, knowledge, expertise, and experience, then even though I would be having substantial interest, still clubbing is not applicable, because in that case government says that it is a genuine salary. But if she is not having required qualification, or if the husband is not having required qualification, wife is having substantial interest, then government doubts that it is because of the decision making which might be influenced by this substantial shareholder. Maybe that person, because of the approach of that person who is having substantial interest, the partner is earning the income, so you have to pay the tax on that salary. Point clear or not? If not clear, please raise your hand. If the point is not clear, please raise your hand. Okay, please raise your hand if the point is clear now. If section 64 subsection 1 clause 2 is 100% clear, please raise your hand. Very good. Now I am coming to my next point. So technically it is the fourth point of clubbing, or second point of section 64 subsection 1. It is section 64 subsection 1 clause 4. Subject to the provisions of clause 1 of section 27. I don't know whether you remember section 27 or not. I have covered that section 27. It was deemed ownership under the head house property. I am skipping that for the time being. So subject to the provisions of that section and clause, to the spouse of such individual from assets transferred directly or indirectly to the spouse by such individual otherwise than for adequate consideration or in connection with an agreement to live apart. It's very simple. If Mrs. X transferred 50 lakh rupees to husband, Mrs. X transferred 50 lakh rupees to the husband. Why? Is it because of the court ruling? Because, for example, if they want to live separately, so because of divorce condition, maybe court has said that to that lady that you please transfer the amount to the husband. Government says that is valid. That is why it is written that otherwise then, in connection with an agreement to live apart. If one partner is transferring some assets to other partner in connection with an agreement to live apart, then that is a genuine transfer. There is no clubbing. Or for adequate consideration, Mrs. X transferred 50 lakh rupees to the husband. Husband has transferred the house of 50 lakh to wife. Government says there is no problem then. It is genuine. This is what adequate consideration. One partner transferred 50 lakh to this partner. That partner transferred 50 lakh of house to the partner who has given 50 lakh. Government says it is genuine. But other than these two cases, neither there is any agreement to live apart, nor there is anything adequate consideration. Then government says if any asset is transferred to the spouse, directly or indirectly, doesn't matter, transferor will continue to pay the tax on the income earned on that asset because of section 64 subsection 1 clause 4. Point clear or not? If clear, please raise your hand.
Sir, what is this adequate consideration?
Adequate means genuine. For example, I am transferring my house which is having market value of 1 crore rupees to my wife. Adequate means that on an average, suppose my wife has given me 95 lakh. Government says no issue, it's genuine. But my wife have given 10 rupees to me. Government says it is nothing, but in genuine transfer, you have to pay the tax on the income earned by the spouse in that house. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Now this is my second point of section 64 subsection 1. Now, do you know why it is written subject to the provisions of clause 1 of section 27? Anyone who can make a judgment why it is written? Why it is written? Can you tell me why it is written? Can you apply the logic that why it is written? Do you know why it is written? Section 27 clause 1 is also clubbing of income indirectly. If you remember, 27 is deemed ownership section. And when the house was transferred to the wife by the husband or by the wife to the husband, already it would be treated as deemed ownership, where the transferor would be treated as the person who is having the ownership of the house. Let me show you section 27. This is section 27. This is section 27. It was clause 1. Can you see clause 1? It is similar to this section 64 subsection 1 clause 4. An individual who transfer otherwise than for adequate consideration any house property to his or her spouse, not being a transfer in connection with an agreement to live apart, ignore this minor child. Ignore this minor child. I'm not discussing this point. Shall be deemed to be the owner of the house of the property so transferred. Now, whenever without adequate consideration or without an agreement to live apart, if any house was transferred to the spouse, transferor is already treated as owner of the house under section 27 clause 1. That is why there was no need to include the house transferred now separately under section 64 subsection 1 clause 4, because there would be overlapping of sections then. It's nothing but indirectly clubbing itself. Though the word clubbing is not used in section 27, but it is clubbing because the transferor would be treated as owner. And if you remember the house property section 22, ownership is necessary if you want to tax rental income. So indirectly, when house is transferred to the partner without an agreement to live apart or without adequate consideration, then the transferor would be treated as still the owner of the house, and transferor has to pay tax on the rental income. So indirectly, that is already clubbing. That is why section 64 subsection 1 clause 4 says what? Subject to the provisions of 27(1), because section 64 subsection 1 clause 4 knows that if house is transferred to the spouse otherwise than for adequate consideration or without an agreement to live apart, it has already been treated as clubbing of income under section 27 clause 1, and there is no need to include it again under section 64 subsection 1 clause 4. But 27(1) includes only house and 64(1)(4) includes all the assets. As you can see, it includes all assets, but 27(1) includes only house. So whenever house is transferred to the spouse, apply clubbing under section 27(1). Other than house, whenever any asset is transferred to the spouse, applying clubbing under section 64(1)(4). If the point is clear, please raise your hand. Very good. Next point now. 64 subsection 1 clause 6. अब वाइफ तो कवर हो गई उसमें, या हस्बैंड कवर हो गया, कभी कभार बहू को भी गिफ्ट दे दिए जाते हैं। फादर इन लॉ और मदर इन लॉ वैसे कम ही देते हैं, वैसे फादर इन लॉ और मदर इन लॉ तो कम ही फैमिलीज में होता है कि बहू को गिफ्ट दें, पर मान लो दे दें, वो भी क्लबिंग है। इट सेज व्हाट? टू द सन्स वाइफ। नाउ व्हेनेवर एनी इंडिविजुअल ट्रांसफर्स टू द सन्स वाइफ, सो हु कैन ट्रांसफर टू द सन्स वाइफ? इधर फादर इन लॉ, ससुर ट्रांसफर कर सकते हैं, और मदर इन लॉ, सास भी ट्रांसफर कर सकते हैं। सो व्हेनेवर दीज टू कैटेगरी ऑफ पीपल, इधर फादर इन लॉ और मदर इन लॉ, if these people transfer to the son's wife any asset from those assets otherwise than for adequate consideration, any income earned by the son's wife from that asset which is transferred by father-in-law or mother-in-law, Without adequate consideration, government says your intention was to just avoid paying tax. You have to pay the tax. I transfer to my son's wife, for example. Suppose I would be transferring to my would-be daughter-in-law, for example, rupees 20 lakh rupees. Why? I said just I transferred without adequate consideration. Government says what? No. On this 20 lakh, whatever your son's wife will earn, you have to include that income in your hand because that was ingenuine transfer. This is my section 64, subsection 1, clause 6. Please raise your hand if the point is clear.
Sir, any significance of this date, the first day of June 1973?
ये प्रोविजन उसी दिन से एप्लीकेबल होना शुरू हुआ, उससे पहले एप्लीकेबल नहीं था. तो उससे पहले अगर किसी ने ट्रांसफर किया तो गवर्नमेंट कहते कोई बात नहीं. पॉइंट क्लियर?
Got it, sir.
But we are not supposed to learn this date because we are running in 1920. So there are very less chances that there is any income which is transferred from that asset which happened before 1973. So for our level, that is not necessary. That is why I haven't discussed. But in practical cases, you have to study everything. Now, next point. Now, government is the people who made the law. They were having some thinking in their mind for the future also. What people could have done then? Rather than now, what is section 64(1)(2)? Only salary income from the concern in which I am having substantial interest. That was 64(1)(2). What is 64(1)(4)? Income from assets transfer to wife directly, or wife transfer something to husband directly. What is 64(1)(6)? When something is transferred to son's wife. Now 64(1)(7) and 64(1)(8), these are just bypass, just to make sure that 64(1)(4) and 6 are not bypassed. What is 64(1)(4)? Asset transfer to spouse. Now, for example, I will transfer the asset to Mr. X, and I'm giving the instruction to Mr. X that whatever income is earned, you please transfer to my spouse. Are you getting my point? In 64(1)(4), what I was doing, I was transferring directly something to my spouse. Now, between me and my spouse, one another person has been created by me. I am transferring not to my spouse now. I am transferring the assets to this Mr. X. But I am saying to Mr. X, whatever you want, give it to my spouse. Government says nothing. This is also a fraud. You simply wanted to bypass 64(1)(4). So they brought 64(1)(7) into picture. It says, whenever income is earned by whenever income from to any person or association from assets directly or indirectly, from asset transferred otherwise than for adequate consideration to the person or association by such individual. I have transferred some asset to this person or association, any person. But do you know what is my instruction? Income from such asset is for the benefit of my spouse. The government says, why you are transferring the assets to this person then? Your intention is nothing. You simply wanted to avoid section 64(1)(4), because in 64(1)(4) Act says directly transfer to spouse. Now 64(1)(7) says indirectly transfer. That means you are transferring something to other party with instruction to other party that give everything to my spouse. Government says it is also clubbing. You have to pay the tax as per section 64(1)(7). And similarly, in section 64(1)(6), what was happening? When father-in-law or mother-in-law transfer something to the son's wife. Now in 64(1)(8), what will happen? If father-in-law or mother-in-law are transferring something to other person with clear instruction that whatever you earn, give it to our son's wife, it is also clubbing under section 64(1)(8). So I have covered both these two. Any problem, please ask, otherwise raise your hand. So in 64(1), I have covered 5 clauses: 64(1)(2), 64(1)(4), 64(1)(6), 64(1)(7), 64(1)(8). So technically 5 points we have covered. Section 60 and 61, 2 points we have covered. So I have taught you 7 cases of clubbing of income where individual has to pay the tax. Next point. Now, if you remember, what was there in section 64.1.2? In 64.1.2, what was there? Remuneration from the concern in which I was having substantial interest. But do you know, so many times what will happen? Both husband and wife will be having substantial interest. So many times what will happen? Both husband and wife will be having substantial interest. In that case, the question arises, then how to compute the, how to apply the provisions of clubbing? When husband is also having substantial interest, wife is also having substantial interest, both are employed without any qualification, then how clubbing will be applicable? Act says, explanation 1, Act says what? Read it carefully. For the purposes of clause 2, do you know which is clause 2? 64.1.2. The individual in computing whose total income the income referred to in that clause is to be included shall be the husband or wife. Now, who is that person? If both are having substantial interest, both are without qualification, both are getting salary from the concern, then who will pay the tax? In whose hands clubbing would be applicable? Act says it would be that husband or that wife whose total income. When I say total income, it means net taxable income. After all the 5 heads, after giving deduction, whatever figure I get, this is my total income. Whose total income excluding this remuneration from this concern? Because this remuneration is the disputed point. Ignore this remuneration for the timing, and then let us see what is the total income of both husband and wife separately. And whosoever is earning the higher income, in that husband or wife hands, the salary income of that from that concern would be taxable. That's it. Please raise your hand if this point is clear. Any doubt you ask? When both husband and wife are having substantial interest, both are working without qualification, then the question arises, clubbing is applicable in the hands of husband or wife? In whose hands? Act says, ignore that disputed remuneration and then let us know what is the total income of both these people. And whosoever is earning the higher income, clubbing would be applicable for that disputed remuneration in the hands of this highest or higher income person. Now I have covered 7 points: 60, 61, 64.1.2, 64.1.4, 64.1.6, 64.1.7, 64.1.8. 8th point of clubbing, minor child. It is subsection 1A. Still section 64 is going on, but subsection 1A. In computing the total income of any individual, there shall be included all such income as arises or accrues to his minor child, not being a minor child suffering from any disability of the nature specified in section 80U. All the incomes earned by minor child are taxable in the hands of father or mother. I will tell you now father or mother, but for the timing, minor child will not compute the income in his or her own hands. It will be taxable in the in the hands of father or mother. I will tell you whether father or mother. But in one case, minor child himself or herself will pay the tax. Not in one case, in fact, more than one cases, but it is specifically excluded if any minor child is a differently abled child. If any minor child is a differently abled child, unfortunately, in the Income Tax Act, we are still using that not healthy words, you can say. So act still is going on with the word suffering from any disability. Otherwise, the good or correct word now, which we have started using overall, is differently abled child. But act still uses the old word, so I have no option but to use it for the timing, only to make you understand. Otherwise, we should, in general parlance, we should use the word differently able. Not being a minor child suffering from disability of the nature specified in section 80U. Do you know why? In 80U, which I will tell you later on, some deductions are available. Flat 75,000 or 1,25,000. Anyone, any person who is having some disability. If normal disability, 75,000 is flat deduction. If severe disability, 1,25,000 is flat deduction. Now, if you club this income, then this loss will be, then this benefit will not be available to the father or mother, because it is available only to a disabled child or disabled person. If you apply clubbing on these children, then they will lose this benefit of 75 and 125. That is why government says that except those minor children who will get the deduction of 80U, apply clubbing on each minor child. Further, in two more cases, there is no clubbing in the hands of minor child. No clubbing. This is what provided is written. Manual work done by him. If any minor child has earned something because of his or her own manual work, no clubbing. Second point, if minor child has earned something because of skill, talent, knowledge, experience, like in Kaun Banega Crorepati, dance competition, singing competition, that is because of their own skill and knowledge, then there is no clubbing. Effectively, I can say in three cases, minor child income will not be clubbed. If minor child is suffering from disability under Section 80U, no clubbing. Any manual income of minor child, no clubbing. Special knowledge, experience, and talent income of minor child, no clubbing. Otherwise, clubbing will be applicable for each minor child. Who? Father or mother? This is what the Act says. In case father and mother are not divorced or marriage is still going on, then that person, father or mother, whose total income, exclude this minor child income and then see who is earning the higher income. Father is earning the higher income, then father in father hands minor income will be clubbed. If mother is earning the higher income, then in mother hands clubbing will be done. And in case marriage does not persist, divorce ho chuka hai, या because of some reason if marriage doesn't persist, then in whose hands? Then that parent who has maintained the minor child in that previous year in which there is the income. That's it. That's it. Please raise your hand if section 64 subsection 1A is also clear. In total, I have covered 8 cases of individuals. Please raise your hand. Great. Now, have you noticed something? In all these 8 cases, only individual is there. That means clubbing is applicable only for individual, not to a HUF, firm, company, association, body of individual, not to anyone. Only for clubbing, only individual. Clubbing is applicable only and only if for individual assesses, not to other person. Now we have one more section of clubbing. This I will discuss later on, not today. That is section 64 subsection 2. I will discuss this section later on, and that is sufficient as far as clubbing of income is concerned. If you have any problem, please ask me. And now before this, I would like to tell you one thing. When you were discussing that remuneration point, the word used was, while computing substantial interest, we were using the word relative. That not only my shareholding, my relative. Now we have not yet discussed what is this relative. Relative is not defined in section 64. So you need to go to the section 2. And in section 2, clause 41, relative is defined. Why I would like to show this every time, because you must know how you should check the definitions. Don't frame your own definition. Section 2 defines it. You can see this. This is section 2, clause 41. Relative means husband, wife, brother, sister, or any linear ascendant or descendant of that individual. So while computing substantial interest, I will not only check my shareholding, my wife's shareholding, my brother's shareholding, my sister's shareholding, and my grandson, my great grandson, or my grandfather, great grandfather, my father, linear ascendant or descendant of that individual. Collectively, when the shareholding will be checked, and if that becomes at least 20, it would be treated as I have substantial interest. I hope the point is clear. Now remaining section 64 and subsection 2 I will discuss in the next class tomorrow. Clubbing is over from my side except this one section. Please raise your hand if clubbing is clear. Please raise your hand if clubbing is clear. If your theory concept is strong, any numerical you can attempt now very easily. Okay, so let me have the attendance now. Any problem you can ask.